Hello and welcome back. In today's video, we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings, some playoff updates, a couple of injury news in the Eastern Conference Final, plus three big pieces of news concerning the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Arizona Coyotes, and a possible trade that I think could happen for Philadelphia Flyers goalie Carter Hart. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. I hope you like my new intro. I think it's pretty good, but I think with us being now 9 months into my YouTube channel, I wanted to give us an intro to help out the channel, so I hope you guys like that intro. But to kick things off today with some of the news that's happened from around the NHL, we've got a handful of signings to get to. So we'll start with the Philadelphia Flyers, as they have signed defenseman Igor Zamula to a one-year contract extension of an average annual value of $775,000, and the deal will begin at the start of this year. Now, Zamula has been a really good defender for the Philadelphia Flyers when called upon. Zamula has mostly been an AHL forward over the past couple of years, but he has gotten a couple of NHL stints. He had 4 goals and 29 points in 58 games last year at the AHL level, but got into 10 NHL games, no points, but did look really good. This year, he was able to get into 14 NHL games and put up 4 assists, and with a healthy scratch on the Flyers roster for a couple of games, but also played a big chunk of the season over in the AHL, putting up a goal and 19 points in 44 games. So, looks like a pretty good defender. Zamula's extension kicks in at the start of this year, so I would expect Zamula to probably contend for a third pair spot. We know that the Flyers are probably going to go through some major changes this year, including moving off a couple of big pieces, and that could include blue liners Ivan Provorov, Tony DeAngelo, and maybe even Travis Sanheim. So if the team who's going through a rebuild is looking to move on from some of these guys, they're going to need some guys to replace them in the lineup. And Zamula, I think, is a prime candidate to do so. He looks like a really good player. I think he'll fit in really well on the third pair. So in my opinion, I think Zamula would work great on the third pair for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I think he would do a fantastic job there. So good extension for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I expect Zamula to probably contend for a roster spot this year. Next, we have the Buffalo Sabres signing Victor Nuchev to a 3-year, $870,000 deal, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, Nuchev is a left winger. He was a third-round pick of this past year's draft, the 2022 draft, so really recent draft pick, so good to see him get his entry-level contract. He had been playing over in the KHL over the past couple of years. Only got into 1 KHL game, was playing majority of the seasons last year with the minor teams. This past year, though, he's actually done really well, putting up 4 goals and 12 points in 57 games. So pretty good season for Nuchev. Probably still going to need some development time. He was only drafted last year, so I'll expect him to continue to develop in the AHL for probably 1 to maybe 3 years more. But I think in time, Nuchev should definitely be a really good forward for the Buffalo Sabres, and I think they really got a good player here. So I think in time he could probably be a good, decent middle six forward, maybe third or second line forward, playing with some of those other top young guys in Buffalo. But for now, I think he'll probably need a couple more years in minors after having some good years in the KHL, and then he should be able to challenge for a roster spot. But definitely a good signing for the Sabres, and good to see Nuchev get his entry-level contract. Next, over with the Seattle Kraken, they send Ales Stejska to a 1-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $870,000, and they'll begin at the start of next year. Now, Stejska was a 2015 4th-round pick of the Minnesota Wild. He never signed with the Wild, left. He has been a free agent for the past couple of years. He's been playing over in Czechia, and he's actually doing quite well. Had a 2.54 goals against average and a .910 save percentage in 46 games last year, and improved on that this year, putting up a 2.14 goals against average and a .914 save percentage in 55 games. So he looks like a really good player. I would expect Stejska to probably play in the minors for the next couple of years. Maybe he gets a shot as like the backup goalie in Seattle, but I don't expect too much of him from the NHL level. I think it's quite possible he could be backup at some point, but for the time being, I think it'll probably be a minor league goalie going into next year. But definitely, he's had some pretty good seasons over in Czechia, and it would not surprise me at all if he was going to contend for the backup role in Seattle. So, good signing there, and hopefully, after not getting a good chance with the Minnesota Wild a few years back, Stejska can make the best of this opportunity with the Seattle Kraken. Next, with the Arizona Coyotes, they signed Aku Ratu to a 2-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $896,000. Now, Ratu is the older brother of Atu Ratu, who is with the Canucks right now. He doesn't have as much star potential as Atu does with the Canucks, but he still looks like a pretty good forward. He's been playing over in Liga over the past couple of seasons, was a 2019 fifth-round pick of the Arizona Coyotes. Had 11 goals and 22 points in 56 games last year, but had a whole bunch better this year, putting up 18 goals and 42 points in 53 games. So Ratu looks like a pretty good player. He's a center, so I would expect him to possibly be a good bottom six center, maybe in the next year or two for the Arizona Coyotes. We know that Arizona doesn't have too much offensive talent right now, but definitely, I think if he could develop for another year or two, continue to grow his game, and I think in a year or two he could definitely be a good third, fourth line center for the Arizona Coyotes. So maybe not as much star potential as some of the other guys, but definitely I think he could be an NHL forward. So good sign for the Arizona Coyotes to get him under contract, and hopefully he can continue to develop and get into the NHL in the not too distant future. Next, with the Columbus Blue Jackets, they signed Dmitry Voronikov to a 2-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $925,000, and the deal will begin at the start of the next year. Now, Voronikov was a 2019 fourth-round pick of the Blue Jackets. He's a left winger and been playing over in the KHL over the past couple of years. Had a pretty good season last year over in the KHL, getting 7 goals, 12 points, 38 games. This year, though, a lot better, putting up 18 goals, 31 points in 54 games. So, for Voronikov, looks like a really good player for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Probably going to need another year or two in development. I know he's already had a lot of time developing in the KHL, but I would expect him to probably get at least 1, maybe 2 years of development in the AHL before contending for an NHL spot. But I think in time he could definitely be a good, maybe third-line left winger for the Jackets. Does look like he could have some NHL potential. So, good signing for the Jackets, adds another good young prospect to their prospect pool, and I think in time, Voronikov should definitely challenge for a roster spot. And lastly here with the Boston Bruins, with probably the most significant signing of these guys, and that is that the Boston Bruins have signed Matthew Poitras to a 3-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $870,000. Now, Poitras was a second-round pick from this past year's draft, the 2022 draft. He looks like he could be eventually a elite-level top-6 center. He's been playing over in the OHL over the past couple of seasons, and he's actually done quite well. Had 21 goals and 50 points in 68 games last year. Not as good putting the puck in the net this year, but still did pretty good, putting up 16 goals and 95 points in 66 OHL games this year. So he looks fantastic. Definitely probably going to need another year or two in the minors. It's probably going to be good for his development to probably continue to grow his game. But I think in time, Poitras could definitely be a really good top 6 center. I think in time he could probably take one of those spots that Krejci or Bergeron have in that top 6 and really run with it. I think he's definitely that good of a center. So, in my opinion, in time, Poitras should definitely be a really good top 6 center. Probably going to need a year or two in minors, but I think eventually he could take over for Bergeron or Krejci. I think he's going to be a really good young NHLer for the Boston Bruins for years to come. So, good to see the Boston Bruins sign Poitras. He should be a good top 6 center in the next couple of years. Good to see the Jackets sign Voronikov. Should be a good third-line left winger in a few years' time. Good to see Ratu sign with the Arizona Coyotes. Should be a good bottom 6 center in a year or two for the Arizona Coyotes. Also good to see Stezka sign with the Kraken. Gives him another goalie option. Could be a good third, fourth stringer in the AHL to start the NHL season. Also good to see Nuchev signed with the Buffalo Sabres, recent draft pick, should be a good NHLer in a couple of years' time. Playing in the middle, 6 on the wing for the Sabres. And also good signing for Zamula, as I think extending Zamula, who could play on the third pair next year, was a really good move for the Philadelphia Flyers. And hopefully all these guys, now that they've got their contracts done, can continue on with their careers and continue to hopefully grow and get those next steps into the NHL. So that's all the signings we're going to get to today. Next, we're going over to the playoff update part of the video. Now, there have been 5 games since we last talked. There's starting to just be 1 game every day now, so not too much to update here, but the conference finals have gone underway. So back on Thursday, we had the Game 1 opener between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. The Canes were able to open the scoring 1-0 after 1. The Panthers were able to score 2 goals in the second period, including a goal from Carter Verhaeghe to give the Panthers a 2-1 lead over the Hurricanes going to the third period. Early in the third, Stefan Noesen was able to tie the game up to make it a 2-2 game, and that is the way the game ended in the third period, so it'll go to overtime. Overtime 1 went by, and no one scored. So we went to double overtime. Double overtime went by. No one scored. We went to triple overtime. Triple overtime went by. No one scored. We go to quadruple overtime. And in quadruple overtime, with 13 seconds left, 13 seconds away from a quintuple overtime, Matthew Tkachuk was able to score for the Florida Panthers to break the Hurricanes' hearts and get the Florida Panthers the 3-2 quadruple overtime road victory over the Hurricanes. So really tightly contested affair. Both goalies were really good. Bobrovsky in Florida, Anderson in Carolina. Both goalies had really good showings in the first game. Canes were able to get a couple goals. Panthers were able to get a couple goals. And it took to quadruple overtime. This was the 6th longest game in NHL history. So definitely a really long game. But the Panthers were able to merge with the 1-0 series lead after this game. So Panthers took a 1-0 series lead into Game 2. Then we went on to Friday's action where we had the All-Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights. And it was a pretty tight game. Both teams looked like they were doing pretty good. Robertson opened the scoring in the series, gave the Stars a 1-0 lead after 1. Then the Golden Knights were able to even up the scoring thanks to William Karlsson to make it a 1-1 game after 2. Then there was some pretty good scoring in the third period. Karlsson was able to give the Knights a 2-1 lead with his second of the game. Then Hintz was able to knot out the score for the Stars to make it a 2-2 game. Luger was able to get his first of the playoffs to give the Knights a 3-2 lead before Ben scored a very late goal with the goalie pulled to tie the game up for the Stars 3-3, and then it went to overtime again. A lot of people thought, oh no, here we go again. It's going to go to like 2, 3, 4 overtimes. But it only took a couple of minutes before Brett Howden was able to get the overtime winner for the Vegas Golden Knights and send the Knights to the 1-0 series lead thanks to the 4-3 overtime victory in Game 1. So, good, tight game. Both teams were really good in Game 1. It was no really runaway for the scores. It was really close, and the Knights were just able to get away with the victory. So, good for the Knights to get the win on home ice, and they take the 1-0 series lead into Game 2. So then we go to Game 2 on Saturday between the Panthers and the Hurricanes. So it was another really close contest between these two teams. Chatfield was able to score in the first period to give the Carolina Hurricanes a 1-0 lead after 20 minutes. Barkov would answer back in the second period to make it a 1-1 game at the end of 2. That's actually the way it would also end after 60 minutes. After the third period, it was a 1-1 game and went to overtime again. For the third straight game in the conference final, we would go to an overtime game. And in this one, it was the same hero as it was in Game 1, as Matthew Tkachuk, less than 2 minutes in on the power play, was able to get the overtime victory to send the Panthers back home with a 2-0 series lead over the Hurricanes. So this is starting to play out like the same sort of scenario that the Panthers had against the Maple Leafs. Won the first 2 games on the road, were able to win the series in 5. So it's starting to look a little bit shaky for the Hurricanes, but they went to Florida for Game 3, down in the series, so hopefully they could win. Was basically a must-win game for the Hurricanes in Game 3. So then we went on to Game 2 between the Stars and Golden Knights. Stars were able to open the scoring. Stone was able to get a goal for the Golden Knights to tie it out quickly at 1-1. That's the way the first ended. In the second, I think Miro Heiskanen was able to get the 2-1 goal to give the Stars a 2-1 lead. At the end of the second period, that's the way it was for the most of the third too. The Stars were trying to hold on, tie the series up, but then a very late goal with 2 minutes and 22 seconds left from Jonathan Marchessault was able to give the Golden Knights a tie game. And then on this goal here in overtime, remember all clips credited to Sportsnet, but this clip here, the Golden Knights, once again, really early into the first overtime, were able to get the overtime winner. Chandler Stevenson puts in the game winner, and the Golden Knights are going to Dallas with a 2-0 series lead. So definitely, I don't think Dallas is out of this by any means. Dallas was really good. They should have probably won that Game 2. The Onger was really good. Vegas was just able to get a late goal and the overtime winner. So Vegas really did steal one from Dallas. I'm not surprised at all if Dallas was able to make this a 2-1 game in Game 3 later tonight. But definitely, 2 really close games between 2 really good teams, and I can't wait to see how the Stars were able to answer back in Dallas. So we got a 2-0 series lead for Golden Knights, and then last night we had Game 3 in Florida between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers, and this was a goalie battle. There was basically no scoring in this entire game except for 1 goal, and that was Sam Reinhart halfway through the second period on the power play. It would stand as the lone goal of the entire game. Bobrovsky earned himself the shutout, and the Florida Panthers were able to shut out the Hurricanes 1-0 in what was basically a must-win Game 3 for the Hurricanes. So that is absolutely atrocious news for the Hurricanes, who are now down 3-0 in the series. So Panthers were able to get up 3-0 in that second round series against the Leafs. They're up 3-0 against the Canes. So definitely, they look like a really dominant team. After being down 3-1 against Boston, they've obviously flipped the switch. They've won 3 straight against Boston, they won 4 or 5 against Toronto, and now they've won 3 straight against the Carolina Hurricanes. So, I mean, since losing Game 4 to the Boston Bruins to go down 3-1, that team is 10-1. So they look like a scary team to face right now, and they are now 1 win away from their first Stanley Cup final appearance since their only Stanley Cup final appearance back in 1996. So definitely, they have the Canes on the ropes and can end the series tomorrow. So if they do end the series, we'll be talking about that on Thursday. If they don't end the series, then there will be a Game 5 on Friday night. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but can't believe that the Florida Panthers are a win away from the Stanley Cup final when it was so many questions about them even making the playoffs just a handful of weeks ago. But definitely good for the Panthers. They've definitely been pushing hard. Hopefully they can continue to push hard and they make the Stanley Cup final in the not too distant future. But we have a Panthers 3-0 lead right now. No team has been able to come back in the conference final in the NHL from down 3-0. So definitely going to be interesting to see if they are going to be able to do so. But Panthers lead 3-0 and can end the series tomorrow against Carolina. And the Golden Knights are up 2-0, looking for a commanding 3-0 series lead later tonight against the Dallas Stars. So pretty interesting conference finals. There have no been blowouts like we saw in the second round. All been really close, tightly contested affairs, and I love this type of hockey. So hopefully we'll have another close game between the Stars and the Golden Knights, and it'll be interesting to see if the Stars are able to get their first win in the series, or if the Knights take the commanding 3-0 series lead. But that's all the playoff updates I'm going to get to today. A couple of quick injury updates. As we did talk about last Thursday, Teravainen did end up getting into Game 1. So he recovered from his hand injury he suffered early in that first round against the Islanders. That caused him to miss the last 2 games of that first round series and the entire second round series. So good to see Teravainen getting back. Definitely still need him to play extremely well if the Carolina Hurricanes are going to send this one back to Carolina for Game 5. And then also in last night's action in Game 3, Alexander Barkov left the game, did not return, and he's currently out right now for an unknown period of time due to a lower body injury. So that's a really big blow. Barkov's a really good top 6 forward, the Panthers' top line center, so if he's out for any significant period of time, that's going to be a big blow to the Panthers organization. But hopefully it's not too bad. He can come back, play maybe in tomorrow's game. If not tomorrow, then maybe he can play in one of the next games for the Panthers. But definitely going to be interesting to see, and hopefully it's not too big of a blow, and Barkov can get back in the not too distant future. But definitely going to be interesting to see, and something we should be keeping our eye on. But definitely good news for Teravainen to get back, and hopefully Barkov is not going to be out for too long. So really good injury news, not too much to talk about here, but that's all the injury news I'm going to get to today. And next we go over to the news and rumors part of the video. So just to start with, we'll start with the Arizona Coyotes. Now there's been a lot of fallout since last week when the Tempe vote was voted no. I have a video dedicated to that, so if you want to go check that out, I definitely suggest you do. Definitely talk about what options Arizona has, but since that video, there's been a few developments. As we know, the team and the NHL have said that they're going to play ASU next year, which I think is probably the right move. There was some talk late last week, I think on Friday or Saturday, about them possibly looking into trying to get new land. It's set to try and do the same sort of thing they were doing in Tempe, build a new arena. But since Friday, we really haven't heard much about anything there. So I'm not exactly sure what situation that is right now. We still haven't heard anything about the Phoenix Suns owner letting them possibly play in their arena. So there's not really much that we've heard about them staying in Arizona. There's really not much we've heard, period. So it's definitely interesting. There's definitely a lot of people who are upset about this. We've heard Elliot Friedman say that owners who are not happy with the Arizona situation right now. The NHLPA doesn't sound like they're too happy with the situation right now. We've even heard that, according to some reports, some players have complaints about the Arizona Coyotes right now, some of their players. So my guess would be that some of their players who are signed for the next couple of years in Arizona, my guess would, not saying these are the players, but my guess would be guys like Clayton Keller, Nick Schmalz, Lawson Krause, Christian Fischer, Valimaki, Vejmelka, maybe some of their younger guys, but anyone who has a longer contract in Arizona, I guess, would be sort of upset with the way Arizona's going right now because they have a long contract in Arizona and they have no idea what the future holds for this team. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, but I don't see Arizona trading away all of their players. They're going to need to ice a team for next year. But it just sounds like there's a lot of players in Arizona right now that are really unhappy. It does make some of us wonder if some of those players will be moved at some point in the offseason. We were already talking before at the trade line and just after about them possibly moving on from guys like Schmalz and Krause in the offseason. I also wondered about Vejmelka, as I thought those three would be guys who they could get value for. But now it just looks like there's a lot of players there who don't really want to be there if there's no future plan in Arizona. And I've also heard some reports say that tomorrow, on Wednesday, the NHLPA will meet with the NHL and try and get some clarity on what's next for the team. That situation is just not looking good for anyone. The other owners are unhappy. The NHLPA doesn't sound too happy. The players in Arizona who have the future there is unhappy. I don't know how the Arizona Coyotes are going to ice a team next year if they have not going to be able to sign any players in free agency to try and fill out that roster. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of weeks for Arizona. As I said, I still expect them to probably play next year at ASU, but I'll expect the long-term future to be somewhere else, whether it be Salt Lake, whether it be KC, whether it be Houston. I still don't see any sort of a future for the Arizona Coyotes, but it just sounds like the NHLPA isn't happy, the other owners are unhappy, the players are filing complaints, and they're unhappy. It's quite possible that we could see some players trade out of Arizona, maybe not all of them. But like I said, Arizona's still in the rebuild mode. Probably going to want to move on players who have good value anyway, but they're going to need some players to ice a roster next year. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with Arizona over the next couple of weeks. But they need to have a plan in place in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of questions surrounding that team, and I'm not sure how many players they'll be able to get via free agency or who want to go there via trade if this team that has no long-term future. So it's definitely interesting to see, but something to keep our eye on over the next couple of weeks. And if there is any more news, I will be talking about it on this channel here. So definitely keep up to date with all of that. Next, we go over to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, we got some pretty surprising news over the weekend that Kyle Dubas is not going to be back as the Toronto GM. He was let go, he was in the final year of his contract, and he's no longer going to be the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is quite a surprise. A lot of people thought he was going to be back as the Toronto Maple Leafs GM. So what's next for the Maple Leafs? Well, they need to find a good GM who can help them because there seems to be a lot of speculation that major changes are coming to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I've heard some people say that Nylander could be on the block, Marner could be on the block. A lot of people are now questioning the fact that will Matthews wind up signing by July 1st, or will he be going into the final year of his season without a contract extension? It's definitely going to be interesting. I still can't see the Maple Leafs trade Matthews. He's such a big piece of that organization. They can't let him walk for free in free agency and let him go for nothing. But I don't see him being traded. Now, for Marner and Nylander, on the other hand, those are possible trade options. I said before, they're not going to have enough cap space if they do sign Matthews to sign Nylander as well. So they're going to need to move Nylander if they can't sign him. And I would expect a ton of teams to have some interest in him. Teams who are looking for top six wingers, maybe some guys who are looking for some forward help, especially teams who are Stanley Cup contenders. So yes, I would definitely think that Nylander would definitely be someone on the block. I would be surprised if Marner was. He still has 2 years left this year and next year at just over $11 million on his cap hit, but he's a really good player. He's been close to the 100-point mark over the past couple of seasons. He's definitely been one of their better players, and I think he was definitely one of their best players in the playoffs. So if they were to trade him, it would have to be for a huge package, and they would have to get some significant pieces in return. But in my opinion, there's going to be a lot of deals that happen for Toronto. This core could easily be shaken up. So they're going to have to find a GM who could be willing to sort of shake up this core. Look at what Florida did last year. Florida exited the second round. They were the President's Trophy winning team. They made a blockbuster move by moving Huberdeau and Weegar to Calgary and got Tkachuk in return. And Tkachuk has so far been able to help them and lead them to the Eastern Conference Final, a win away from the Stanley Cup Final. So it definitely does seem likely that if they were to trade a guy like Nylander or Marner, bring in a new good top six forward who can breathe fresh life into that team. Maybe that's the change that Toronto needs to finally go over the hump and maybe get to Eastern Conference Final next year. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Quite surprising that Kyle Dubas is not going to be back. And let me know down in the comments what you think this changes. Will Matthews be able to sign his extension before the season kicks in? Does Nylander or Marner get traded? In my opinion, I think Nylander should possibly get traded, especially if they can bring in a good top six forward. I think as much as there's been some speculation that if Matthews isn't signed, they could possibly trade him, I don't expect that. Matthews is still a really good piece of that Toronto Maple Leafs group, and I think they have to keep him even if he's not signed. Marner's a little bit more difficult. I still think he's a really good player and should remain with that team, but it will not surprise me at all if the Leafs do wind up trading him. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but with Dubas now not being the Leafs GM, what sort of changes do you think the new Leafs GM will make and try to shake up this core? Let me know down in the comments, as it sounds like there's going to be a lot of changes this summer in Toronto. And lastly here with just a quick trade possibility I have for Carter Hart. Now I know that the Flyers are looking to go through a huge rebuild and they are looking to try and move out some players. And one of those guys could be Carter Hart, entering the final year of his deal. Going to be an RFA at the end of the year, but there's a lot of question marks about him signing long term. A lot of people think that he will probably try and not sign a long-term extension with the Flyers just because they're starting the rebuild and he doesn't want to be there for a long-term rebuild. So there's a lot of possibility that Hart could be dealt in this offseason. And I think a good landing spot for Hart would be the LA Kings. I think the Kings make a lot of sense for Hart. They are looking for a starting goaltender. Hart would be a really good starting goaltender. They have Copley signed for a year, at which point after that they can have Portillo, who's a really good young goalie, be the backup after that. So I think there's definitely a path there for LA to try and acquire Hart. There's also a couple of other good goalies who could be available, like a Gibson, like Jari in free agency, maybe Demko. But I think of the available goalies, Hart is probably the best of the bunch. So what sort of move could the LA Kings make for Hart? Well, I think it's probably likely that if the Kings were to try and acquire Hart, they would probably give up Cal Peterson. Okay goaltender, 2 years left as a contract at $5 million. But he could definitely be a good goaltender for Philadelphia. I know in my recent blog post talking about the Philadelphia Flyers offseason, I did say that the Flyers could try and move Hart and bring in another guy to try and tandem with future goalie Sam Ersson as the NHL level next year. I think Peterson could be a good goaltender. I think Peterson's definitely showed a couple of times in his career that he could be a good starting goaltender. And I think if he can refine that and he can show Philadelphia that he's a really good starting goaltender, in a couple of years' time, Philly could even trade him to another team for a trade package for themselves. So I definitely think Peterson could be a trade chip used to acquire Hart. I would also think that they would either have to part with their second-round pick in this year's draft or their first-round pick in next year's draft. And probably one good young player. I think the Kings are probably the most stacked team with prospects, and I think there could be a couple of guys that the Flyers could get. I would probably center my options around one of Akil Thomas or Tyler Madden, two really good Bill 6 centers who I think could work really well with Philadelphia. So in my eyes, trade package possibly for Hart, who I think would be a really good starting goaltender in LA, would be Cal Peterson to offset the cap, and also to give Philadelphia a stopgap goaltender for the next couple of years to work with Sam Ersson as the sort of tandem goaltender. A second-round pick in 2023 or a first-round pick in 2024. I think they have to part with one of them. And if they part with the second rounder, they probably have to part with a better prospect. So maybe it's the first round in 2024. And then one of Akil Thomas or Tyler Madden, who are both really good second, third line centers of the future who could, I think, make the NHL roster as early as this year. So if the Kings are able to do that, I think they could definitely get Hart. I think that would be intriguing enough for the Philadelphia Flyers to do. And I think with Hart possibly being moved at some point in this offseason, I think that would actually be a pretty good deal for the Philadelphia Flyers. So in my opinion, if Hart is traded, look out for the LA Kings. They are in desperate need of a starting goaltender. Hart's a good young goalie who could help them for the next couple of years and could be a really big piece as to help the LA Kings finally go over the hump and make it past the first round next year. So in my opinion, Hart would be a prime target for the LA Kings to acquire. And if the Kings were to try and acquire him, I'll be looking at a package of Cal Peterson, a 23 second or a 24 first, and one of Akil Thomas or Tyler Madden. I think if they were to offer up that in a trade package, I think the Philadelphia Flyers would be willing to make a trade with the Kings. But definitely, I'd like to hear what you think. If Hart is dealt in this offseason by Philadelphia Flyers, what team do you think he'll go to? And if he is dealt to the LA Kings, is my trade package decent enough to pull off a trade with Philadelphia Flyers? But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, the Instant Hockey blog. I also do a lot of news and rumors on my blog as well, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a description down in the comments. Definitely check that out as well. And I also hope you like my new intro. I'll be using it from now on to start my videos. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video on Thursday. See you guys soon.